All right, we're going to touch real quick on energy code pathways of the IECC. So you have the prescriptive route or the performance route. Your prescriptive is literally like by the table, and I'll just show you real quick the tables, because this is honestly the most common route, simply because people can look at the table and just be, hey, cool, I'm going to install that. Okay, climate zone, it's based on your climate zone. Find your climate zone, you know your maximum U factor of the windows and your skylights. These are your minimum R values for the ceiling, walls. We got your below grade walls here. So honestly, this is a very common method. It's not necessarily the best, though. It's kind of, if you're willing to put in a little more work to model a building, and, you can either do some trade-offs using the REScheck. We also refer to that as the UA alternate route. Again, that's considered prescriptive. But you could also do a performance route, which is your HERS rating. So just real quick, we can check that out. So there's your R value table, and then there's also a U value table, which is not used very often, but you will see this usually in the, here's your U value, and that's kind of what the REScheck does for you. So it's basically going to go in and calculate, hey, you've got all these materials in your assembly. You've got studs for, say, 25%, and then the rest is cavity, right? So you add up basically the R value of every material that makes that up, and then, 1 divided by that, and then times, the factor gets you your U value. So again, REScheck kind of does that. I mean, if you're going in here, you are, say you want to, so say you're going to show all, here it is. So you'll go into your walls, say I want to edit a wall. Wood frame, got your gross area, cavity, and continuous. So it'll kind of calculate the U value here. You can see that here, your U factor. So that does that internally. The REScheck, you typically see, say someone wants to install better windows and not quite so much attic insulation. This is a good example of pretty simple trade-offs. I think the real advantage, though, is when you get into your HERS rating and you actually do a performance. So what happens here is a building gets, essentially we build a model in SketchUp. We get a 3D value perspective of it, and then we can basically take off all of the building assembly areas and linear footage, perimeters, whatnot. We got all the numbers, right? So this was, a building that just wanted to not quite install what the prescriptive table was asking for. So let's see, prescriptively, uninsulated slab, R34, that's prescriptive. R19, there we go. But here we get into our walls. So our climate zone requires either like an R30 cavity, or you can do an R20 plus 5 continuous. This particular job is able to install an R23 bib. So they, basically if you want to do R30, you got to do complete, basically that cavity is filled with foam. These guys wanted to just do cellulose or blown in fiberglass, and it works. Got a rim joist in here. I'm going to do R60, but that was kind of the major one, because adding continuous insulation is not always the easiest to do with installers who are not used to it. It's recommended, but that is a way that, they were able to not have to install that prescriptive wall value. We've got 0.27 windows. Basically the HERS rating takes into account everything. So we've got our mechanical systems in here. We've got our domestic hot water, any recirc pumps, all the lighting, appliances, how airtight the building is, any PV that you want to put on it. So it is a huge math equation, right? And there's so many entries into here that can really gauge essentially the mile per gallon of the project, right? So it's kind of neat to be able to kind of put a sticker on the project and say, hey, you can expect this much in utility bills. Obviously, you'll need a little bit of education, of the homeowners or the tenants, let them know how the building is intended to operate per what you have in here, and just, yeah, some communication in that regard always helps. But yeah, pretty cool. I mean, I think they could even install, say they didn't want to go R60, if they wanted to do, say they want to do R40, again, it lists all of it, so we're not hitting the prescriptive route, but we are hitting the performance route. So just some food for thought. You can definitely have a little more flexibility, and this is really handy if, say, something that gets missed in construction and you're like, I forgot the exterior insulation on the foundation. Instead of digging out your backfill, like exposing that foundation, you can figure it out in here. So it's like, okay, no problem. You get flexibility, which is huge. So that helped a little bit. Thanks.